chapter 1, verse 1, the book of Esther. Vibi me'achashverosh hu achashverosh hamolech mehudu vad kush, sheva v'asrim umea medina, bayamim hahem, keshevas hamelech achashverosh al kisei malchuso, asher b'shushan habira, b'shnas shalosh lamalcho, asa mishte lechol sarav v'avadav chel paras u'madai partamim, v'sori hamedinos lefanav. Bahar also es osher kavod malchuso ves yakar tiferes gedulaso yamim rabim shmonim umaas yom. Okay, so can we please have a translation of the first four verses?
Okay. And it came to pass in the days of Ashurus, he is the Ashurus, who reigned from Huda to Cush, 127 providences. In those days, when King Ashurus sat on his royal throne, which was in Shushan the capital, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his officials and his servants, the army of Persia and Media, the nobles and officials of the provinces being present. When he displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his splendorous majesty for many days, 180 days.
Very good. Okay, so Archel doesn't go into as much details on this particular point I'm about to raise. The Judaica Press edition does quote Targum and translates it to English. This would be on page 2 of the Judaica Press. Esther, the Targum paraphrases from the Great India to Ethiopia, from the east of the Great India until the west of Ethiopia. Which is the Targum from Hodu to Kush. Okay, so now it's let's see, there's something very interesting in the Targum as well about this. Just an interesting anecdote there. See if I can find it. Okay, so the Aramaic word that Targum uses for India, Hindia, which makes sense. It's more closely related to Hindu, right? So it's fascinating. It's fascinating that it's recorded in the Aramaic language as translated 2,000 years ago. Maybe the original name of India was Hindia, but the Europeans renamed it in their colonial wisdom. So, but that makes much more sense. Although India's welcome to have call themselves India if they want to.
Some people are stupid.
Don't be negative. So, but it's just really cool. It's so the translation in Aramaic captured as a photograph of history is the word is Hindia. Just really cool anecdote. Okay.
Yeah, but what was the point of them creating evil and allowing wicked people to live in this world?
Okay, that is off tangent though. But could you wait until we come to a topic like, for example, if we're discussing Haman, so ask that question again. But right now we're just having the introduction to the book. Let's stay on topic, okay?
Okay.
So in the ancient world there was two Kushes and two Hodus. So it's necessary to know which one we're talking about. So yes, this is so from India to Ethiopia. Okay, so he made a banquet. So reading comprehension question. This is an easy one. How many days did he make a banquet for?
180.
Right, correct. We just read it in verse 4. So what he did was he wanted to not be too ostentatious. He merely had a 180-day party. So I'm glad he controlled himself, so it would we don't have to go into too much detail and get to the meat of this.
That's a long party.
Yeah. And he also wore the priestly garments that
Oh, wow.
Hashem was very angry with King Ahasuerus for stealing the Kohen Gadol's garments.
Right. So King Ahasuerus, he was the second king to anger God with misuse of holy vessels from the Beis Hamikdash, including the vestments of the high priest. But he did it based on a miscalculation, whereas Belshazzar did it as just a straight out rebellion.
Mm.
But it was a foolish thing that Ahasuerus did, because he didn't believe in God's power. He thought the time limit had passed, so therefore he can get away with it. Just a weak rationale, but at least it was a rationale. With Belshazzar, he was just in a complete rebellion. So the same day Daniel came to warn him, the same day that he was assassinated.
Who?
Belshazzar, last king of Babylon.
Oh, I thought King Ahasuerus died from sickness at the end of his rule.
Well, he was also punished, but that's something that's later on. Okay, so on on verse 1, the second paragraph, one of the Kirks can read that during Rabbi Akiva's lecture.
During Rabbi Akiva's lecture, the students were not concentrating. To stimulate them, he asked, why did Esther merit to be queen over 127 providences? God said, our matriarch Sarah lived for 127 righteous years. Let her granddaughter Esther rule over 127 providences. Midrash.
Yes, so God is, God, he's always connecting things. He not only wants to reward the righteous in their generation, he wants to reward one of their righteous progeny, because a righteous righteous person loves it when somebody has merit in the world because of them, whether it's a student or a child or a descendant. Okay. Continuing in the in the Hebrew, just to give me a minute.
Found this one under the
on verse 5. Vimlos hayamim ha'ela asa melech l'chol ha'am hanimtzeim b'shushan ha'bira l'migadol v'ad katan mishte shivim yamim b'chatzar ginas bisan hamelech. Chor karpas v'zecheles achuz v'chavle vutz v'argaman al galile chesef amudei sheish mitos zahav v'chesef al ritzvas bahat v'sheish v'dar v'socharis v'ashkos b'chlei zahav v'chelim mikilim shonim v'yain malchus rav kiyad hamelach v'ashasiya chedas ein ones ki chen yisad hamelech Al kol rav besola sos kirtzon ish veish. Okay, please translate verses 5 through 8.
And when these days were fulfilled, the king made a 7-day feast for all the people who were present in Shushan, the capital, great and small alike, in the courtyard of the garden of the king's palace. There were hangings of white, fine cotton, and turquoise wool, held with cords of fine linen, and purple wool upon silver rods and marble pillars. The couches of gold and silver were on the pavement of variegated marble. The drinks were served in golden vessels of diverse form, and royal wine in abundance, in accordance with the king's wealth. And the drinking was according to the law, but without coercion. For so the king had established for every officer in his house to do according to each man's pleasure.
Okay, let's look at the commentary on verse 8. If you could read that, please.
And the drinking was according to the law, but without coercion. The law, as in the established custom, was that people were expected to drink an entire huge goblet of wine, and such goblets were available. But the king ordered that no one should be forced to drink so much if he preferred not to.
So the crazy rules in the Median Persian Empire was that when you have a banquet, so everybody has to have a giant goblet full of wine, and they have to finish the entire thing. So it could be it could potentially be deadly for some people, but that was the law. The ironclad rule. They had to finish it. But in this case, he was flexible. I suppose it's because they wanted it to last 180 days. If they killed off people with wine after a day or two, so it would have messed things up. So they had special permission in this 180-day feast to only have as much as they want.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
It sounds to me like that's 2 feasts, that there was one for 180 days, and then he had a second feast for 7 days after that.
In which verse are you talking about?
Okay, he said that
Verse 5, you mean?
when these days were
Right.
fulfilled, the king made a 7-day feast.
Right.
For
Okay.
all-
So exactly. So we're at 187 days.
Okay,
So,
why
the
have a feast that long?
the accumulated hangover.
I'm telling you, sick from all the food.
Yes, this is one of the least perverse things that we've learned about the enemies of Israel in Tanakh.
Oh my goodness, this is awful.
Yeah, it's a real showdown between purity, spirituality, and just debased forms of humanity. So this is one of the nicest bad things that the bad guys against Israel were doing. Only wine for 187 days in a row.
It's funny.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So now, if you want to ask a question, why did God allow people to drink for 187 days? That's a separate question, but at least it's pertinent to the chapter.
Why did Hashem allow wicked people to live, and why did He bring evil into existence?
Why did God allow wicked people to live? Well, because God gives free will, right? So until the end of days, there's freedom for people to choose good or evil.
That's BS.
No, it's not BS. It's exactly what Anman Chava programmed the world to do. God said, guard the guard the tree of knowledge, and stay in the miraculous garden.
And they
But
misused it.
But due to intervention by the serpent and the mistakes by Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, so therefore it ended up reprogramming the world according to human free will in a bad way. But it's for the long-term good. God foresaw it all was going to happen. So he created a situation where give people free will, and then after the first few thousand years of humans' existence, then God will send Mashiach and wipe away all the tears from the suffering of human choices made, and then from then on, everyone will be in the Garden of Eden again. So
after a few thousand years,
he
brings Mashiach.
You see, once you could have a few thousand years of generation after generation making evil choices, so you can mathematically extrapolate that basically people are going to keep doing this unless there's intervention from heaven, right? So whether or not Israel does enough merits to bring Mashiach down through their merits, or whether it's just wait for the time limit of end of days where evil may reign, but the world continues. So in either case, the it's going to be heaven on earth again, like in the days of Adam and Eve.
So was these turquoise wool, were these from the temple?
Well, a lot of the stuff they were using were from the temple. Turquoise wool. That's a good question. I'm not that part. I don't know. I suppose I could look that up for you.
And then there's this huge, in Hebrew, het. Why? Why was the het so large in the Hebrew?
Linda, what verse?
I'm trying to, I think it's
I
1,
see it.
2, 3,
It
4,
looks like
5,
six.
like 6. It looks like the end of 5th and the beginning of the 6th verse. The het is absolutely huge.
You got a picture of it?
It's a het vav resh.
Oh, you're talking about in the Hebrew text.
Yes.
On the word chur.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Let's see.
Okay, chur is hangings of white. The word alludes to another brazen desecration, excuse me. The word begins with the letter ches, which has a numerical value of 8. Achashverosh paraded around wearing the 8 sacred vestments of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
He dressed himself up as the high priest, like Belosh in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yep. Yep.
So,
and you know what happened to Balosh?
yeah, or as Indy said, the Balak. But it's so George Lucas got it from the book of Esther. That's very interesting. Okay.
I know, but this implies that this really irritated Hashem terribly. That huge het. Ooh.
Yeah, to even for even someone who's not clean to pick it up, let alone wear it for a
187 days.
Well, a less than pious feast.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so everyone had the freedom to drink according to their pleasure. They must have thought this was the coolest feast ever. Not only was a Oktoberfest, Novemberfest, Decemberfest, Januaryfest, April. Okay, but not only was a long-term feast, but it was also people didn't have to drink themselves unconscious. The more we hear about some of these ancient laws, the more grateful we could be. Just keep reading about these ancient countries, and pretty soon people will start singing "God Bless America."
Or being thankful they're born poor.
Yeah. Okay, so let's continue in the text. Now, on Purim, all of the 10 of these chapters are read at one time sitting, and actually twice, once at night, once in the daytime. But it could take us a few weeks to get through this with all the commentaries. So there's more commentaries as we progress into the book. So we're skipping over a lot of commentaries. We're just like basically doing one comment every 4 verses or something. But then we're going to be at a point in the book, we're going to be doing maybe a comment almost every verse. So at that point, we're going to slow down. So I'd say at best, it would take us 2 or 3 weeks to do the book if we were going faster. But it may take 3 or 4 weeks at least. I think we're going to do it in less than 2 months. But it just to be aware that we're not going to do all 10 chapters tonight. Okay, so we read through verse 8. Okay, let's do 9 through 12 in the Hebrew. Gam vashti mahamalka asasa mishte nashim beis hamalchus asher lamelech achashverosh bayom hashvi ketov lev hamelech bayoyin amar limahuman biz sa charvona biz bigsa vagsa zeisar v'charkas Shivas Hasarisim Hamashorsim as Pnei HaMelech Achashverosh. Lahavi es Vashi Hamalka Lifnei HaMelech Bechezer Malchus Laros Ha'amim Vasarim es Yafia Kitos Mar'ahi Vatamain Hamalka Vashti Lavo Bidvar HaMelech Asher Biyad Hasarisim Biktov HaMelech Ma'od Vachamaso Baravo. Okay, please translate verses 9 through 12.
Queen Vesti also made a feast for the women in the royal house of King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he told Mahallum, Bezavath, Habana, Bigtha, and Abigtha, Zetar, and Karsas. The 7 chamberlains who attended King Ahasuerus to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing the royal crown to show off to the people and the officials her beauty, for she was beautiful of appearance. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, conveyed by the hand of the chamberlains. The king therefore became very enraged, and his wrath burned in him.
Continuing verse 13. Vayomer hamelech lachachamim yodei hayitim ki chen devar hamelech lifnei kol yodei das vadin. Vakarov elav karshna sheshar admasa sarshish meres marsana mamuchan shivas sare paras. Umadai roe pnei hamelech hayoshvim rishona b'malchus kedas ma lasos b'malka Vashti ala sher lo asasa es ma'amar hamelech Achashverosh b'yad hasarisim. 13 through 15, please translate.
Then the king spoke to the wise men, those who knew the times, for such was the king's procedure, to turn to all who knew law and judgment. Thus closest to him, Kashana, Sethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meris, Marcina, and Memucan, these 7 officials of Persia and Media, who had assessed the king who sat first in the kingdom. By
Yeah,
the
access to the king. Yeah. By the law.
by the law, what should be done to Queen Vashti for not having obeyed the bidding of King Ahasuerus, conveyed by the hand of the chamberlains?
Okay, please read the commentary on verse 16.
Okay. Can I read the commentary a little bit earlier there about Vashti? I think is very, very interesting.
Okay.
Vashti was not merely the king's wife, she was the queen in her own right, as a daughter of King Belshazzar and the granddaughter of King Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, and in fact, one of the reasons he married her is because he was not of royal blood, so he wanted to solidify his rule.
So he had to do that for her.
Yeah, but she also happened to be very beautiful, so it worked out for him for a couple of years there.
I mean, but he turned out booting her out, and it seemed like that would, he's booted out his royal connection, which
Well,
opens up.
that was normal, Russ, for history. If you look at the kings and queens down through history, commoners or lesser than the royalty would marry someone of royal and get rid of them so they reigned alone.
Well, they could do that, but that reads the for assassination and
Well,
what am I
look at
saying?
history.
Yeah, that they take back over and reinstall
Yep,
the royal
yep.
family.
But Vashti was the real authority. He married her, and then he figured out a way to get rid of her. Who tells his queen to show up naked?
Yeah, well, we haven't gotten to that part of the.
Didn't get to
well,
that yet.
Then you got to that part, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, we have. It's in 11.
yes, technically in the text itself.
Yeah. Okay, so 16.
Okay, but so just to remind you, in Daniel, chapter 6, verse 1, then Darius the Mede received the kingship at the age of 62 years. Verse 2, it pleased Darius to appoint over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the kingdom. 120. And here now there's 127 provinces. So during the reign of Ahasuerus, he captured 7 provinces. So he was, in other words, since the formation of the under Darius and Cyrus, Ahasuerus was the most powerful emperor in their history of the Persian Median Empire, because he conquered 7 provinces. So at this point, he was already accepted as like a heroic figure. He didn't the political imperative to have Vashti as his wife was no longer there.
Okay, she'd served her purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from that perspective. But from the perspective of Haman, who was giving advice, she there was no more use for her.
Right.
Okay, so now if you could read the commentary to verse 16.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Mim Yukon declared, Mim, I guess I'm saying that right, Mim Yukon was actually Haman. Amen. He is the last on the list of advisors, but he spoke up first, disrespectfully. And ignoramus also pushes himself. Always pushes himself to the forefront.
I got an idea.
12b.
Okay, so we haven't yet read verse 16, but it's helping us to be aware of what verse 14 is. 14 is a list of order of the top 7 officers of Persian Media in order of greatness, starting with Karshena, who was the greatest, and Memucan was the least of these 7, and Memucan is Haman. Okay, so keep that in mind. On starting in chapter 2, we're going to need to remember this part. Okay, so all right, now let's read the wisdom of what Memucan is going to tell the king about this, and verse 16 and following. ויאמר ממוכן לפני המלך והשרים, לא על המלך לבדו עבסה, Vashti Hamalka, Ki al kol hasarim val kol ha'amim, asher b'chol medinos hamelech Achashverosh, Ki yetze devar Hamalka, al kol hanashim havzos, ba'alehen, be'enehen, ba'amram hamelech Achashverosh amar lahavi es Vashti Hamalka lefanav, lo va'ah. Vayom hazeh tomarna, Saros paras umadai, asher shamu es devar Hamalka, l'chol sarei hamelech, uchadai bizayon v'katzef. Im al hamelech tov yetze devar malchus milafanav v'kasev b'dasei paras umadai, v'lo yavor asher lo savo, Vashti lifnei hamelech Achashverosh malchusa, yitain hamelech l'rusa, hatova mimena. Nishma pisgam hamelech asher yaseh v'chol malchus ki rabba hi v'chol hanashim yitenu yakar levalehen lemigadol vad katan. Vayitav hadavar b'nei hamelech hasarim vayas hamelech kidvar memuchan. V'yishlach sfarim el kol medinos hamelech el medina umedina kiv saba v'al v'am kiloshono lios kol ish sorer beveso umedaber kiloshon amo. Okay, please translate to the end of the chapter, verses 16 through 22.
I want to do it.
Well, you could read the next chapter, okay? Be ready. All right. Well, do you want to request of Auntie Teresa if you could interrupt and translate now? Because in case you need your beauty sleep or something.
He has my permission if he would
Okay, he sent a very polite request in kitty language. So oh, how eloquent. Okay, so and now but please translate to English, okay? Not kitty language.
Okay.
Okay.
Ugh.
Haman
declared.
translate the actual word, not the
Not Haman.
Yeah, use the actual word because it'll help us follow.
But Memucan was
Here, come a bit closer because we have sound cancellation here. It may be hard to hear you. Come a little closer when you're reading.
Yeah, but I'm not showing my face.
Okay, you don't have to. You're very helpful.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Now that you're closer, you don't make an okay. Just
Okay.
translate, please. Thank you.
Yes, my lord.
I'm the Abba. It's okay. Memucan.
Memucan declared before the king and the officials, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but against all the officials and all the people in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus III.
Well, just read the actual text.
King Ahasuerus, the
Thank
Persian king of Persia.
Okay.
Persia.
All right, now 4.
For the queen's deed will go forth to all women in making their husbands contemptible in their eyes when they will say, King Ahasuerus said to bring Vashti before him, but she did not come. And this day the princesses of Persia who have heard of the queen's deed will speak of it to all the king's officials, and there will be much contempt and rage. If it pleases the king, let there go forth a royal edict from him. Let it be written into the laws of Persia and Media that it's not to be revoked, that Vashti never again appear before King Ahasuerus.
And
let the king confer her royal estate upon another who is better than she. Then the king's decree which he will proclaim shall be heard throughout all his kingdom, great though it be, and all the wives will show respect to their husbands, great and small alike, This proposal was favorable in the eyes of the king and the officials, and the king did according to the word of Menucan. And he sent letters into all the king's provinces, to each province province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, to the effect that every man should rule in his own home and speak the language of his own people.
That's a nice emotional. Yeah, that's probably how they actually said it. Their ridiculous decree. Okay. Okay, so now if you could read the commentary in verse Teresa, if you could read verse 17's commentary.
Okay.
Thank you for the nice reading, Elijah.
Yeah.
You did very well.
17. Okay.
Yeah, that was nice in English and everything. And thank you for refraining yourself from the cat language for now. Yes, we noticed. Okay. Okay, please, Teresa.
Okay. For the queen's deed will go forth. Had this merely been an argument between a husband and a wife, the king would swallow his pride and ignore it. But Vashti's disobedience will affect the entire empire if she is not severely punished. First, because it was set as precedent that if the king can be disobeyed, every wife can defy her husband. Second, Ahasuerus will be a laughing stock because all the women at Vashti's banquet heard her disparage, heard her disparage him, and everyone will say, if the king cannot control his wife, how can he run an empire? That's Nachal Eshkol.
Nachal Eshkol. Right. So I mean, tough audience. Even the ladies were not rooting for Vashti at this point.
Pardon me, Rabbi, but
yeah.
I am lost. Were we reading the commentaries?
Yes, we're reading the commentary in the blue art scroll. We just read on verse 17 of chapter 1, Esther.
All right. All right, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
She was a mean woman anyway. She hated Jews.
Oh yeah. So it says elsewhere that she used to force the pious Jewish girls to take off their clothes and do menial labor, and clean the stone floors, etc., on the Sabbath day. So she was demeaning and torturing the Jewish girls who were very modest, and they were ashamed of taking off their clothes. So
beauty to show.
Right now, the Gemara says in Megillah, Vashti would have normally been proud to go unclothed in front of an audience, but she happened to break out in leprosy, so she was embarrassed. But otherwise, she had no morality to speak of that would have prevented her from being naked. So God made it that she had to feel the same shame that she caused the girls that she was forcing them, the pious girls, she was forcing them to work on the Sabbath without clothing.
Hashem was very angry.
Measure for measure.
Yeah.
And measure for measure. Yeah, measure for measure. He punished her for exactly what she did to others.
Mm-hmm.
That's a recurring theme here in Esther. Now, some prints of the non-Jewish Bible, let's put it that way, don't have the book of Esther. But as we go through this book, we're going to see so much measure for measure being meted out here in this book. It's really a book about justice and the way God works without, in a humble way, without showing miracles that are direct, but the totality of the events are miraculous. And the justice is perfectly fitting this for that. So the book of Esther is a book of subtleties. You have to keep track of it and follow it, and then there are very powerful moral lessons to learn from the book of Esther.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard a Christian scholars question: why would it even be a book in the Bible? It doesn't talk about God, but it talks about everything that God wants. Justice and people to rise up against evil. So I mean, it's very very amazing, actually. Okay, so all right, so let's read the commentary to verse 19, page 6. Mhm.
If it pleases the king, Menachem was about to propose a penalty that might infuriate the king, so he introduced his proposal with great difference. Let as royal edict go out from him, although protocol required that the king consult his council before issuing decrees. This case is an exception. The king should bypass his advisors and declare this far-reaching decree. Divine providence ordained that Menachem declared that the king accept this brief protocol, which established a precedent for such royal authority. 9 years later, when Esther accused Haman of attempting to annihilate her people, the king would
Unilaterally.
Yes, thank you. Unilaterally send Haman to the gallows.
So at the start of this book, that power did not exist in Persia. It had to go for at least a trial among the lead officers of the like the Politburo. You understand? But after this, so they gave the power over to the emperor. So because of this, he was able to pursue justice against him towards the end of the book. So this is another subtle little change that occurred in preparation for a future event. Again, this occurred several years before the actual showdown between Esther and Haman. Okay, please continue in the commentary.
That Vashti never again appeared before King Ahasuerus. But Menachem wanted the king to forbid Vashti from coming to the throne to appeal her sentence, because he feared that if Vashti were allowed to speak to Ahasuerus, he would relent and forgive her, and if that happened, she would avenge herself against Menachem. He was thinking ahead, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's the Medrash Mamlez.
Yeah. Alternatively, this refers to Vashti's offense. The penalty must be imposed because Vashti did not come. Rashi. It is interesting that Menachem did not use the word queen. Vashti had forfeited her claim to respect. Rabbi Meir
Zalotowitz, he wrote the first art school book. And this is it. The very first art school book on Tanakh is Megillah Esther, the book of Esther. So this was published way back in February 1976, the very first art school book.
I think that's the one we have.
And the second one was the book of Ruth. So they started with the writings. It was very unusual.
Mhm.
while Art Scroll was on the writings, I started my Tanakh studies after the five books of Moses with the Judaica Press series because they were actually having English books in on the prophets. So I was doing writings with Art Scroll and prophets with with the Judaica Press. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, if you could continue reading the commentaries here, they're very good, helping us understand this.
Upon another who is better than she. The new queen, knowing what happened to Vashti, would not dare to be disrespectful. I mean, look, Loz,
Mamloys, yeah, the Medrash.
or Minikon, I'll just say Haman. Was consoling the king, saying that he should not miss Vashti because his next choice would be better. Do you want me to go on to 20?
Yeah, keep reading the commentary.
Okay. Throughout all his kingdom, if the king accepts my counsel, it will be an enormous benefit to the entire empire. Women will honor their husbands, and the men will be grateful to the king for placing them on a pedestal in their homes. Far from being perceived as a heartless, ego-driven despot, the king will be toast of the empire. This line of reasoning.
But just if you could pause for a second. So he's selling the demotion of the queen as a heroic episode where all men become cheer for the liberation of manliness in the empire. All because
That's disgusting.
all because Achashverosh stood up against the great evil of Vashti not wanting to shame herself.
He himself caused the evil.
It's, this has all the makings of a great comedy if it wasn't true, but unfortunately it actually occurred.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so please continue. Almost at the end of the chapter in the commentary.
This line of reasoning illustrates how Hashem influences mortals to achieve his divine ends. Asheris would be concerned to gratify his lowest subjects. Yet he was ready to humiliate his wife, his queen, in public by ordering her to parade unclothed before the guest. This was part of Hashem's plan to have Esther become queen so that she would be able to save Israel from genocide. That's from the Benagona. Everyone everything about the decree would increase the king's popularity. Not only did he elevate the position of all the men in the empire, he flattered them by issuing the decree in their own language and in their own script, thus fusing respect for the various traditions of 127 different provinces.
Very good. Thanks for your help. So I read several, the both versions of Art Scrolls English and also the English and Judaica Press, so I could quote to you in English some interesting comments. So I think there was a comment in the Judaica Press. I'll just look through that for a second. Okay, so now one of the really interesting things about Judaica Press, they translate every single word of Rashi. So if that is important to you to know what everything that Rashi says, they always print it in italics, so you could easily find it on the page. Okay, it's that Vashti did not come on that verse in verse 19, and therefore she was executed. So Rashi explicitly tells us she was killed over this. Now, just about every word of Rashi is a quote from a medrash, one or another. So Rashi says it's usually hard to argue with. But she was either way, even according to simple meaning, where she was demoted. It was a special decree that could never be rescinded. So she was permanently made into a just a regular person, no longer a royalty. So her loss of nobility would be equal to death, in the perspective of noble people.
Basically, Bob, Vashti was put to death.
So
Vashti was put to death. Right?
Now, right, she was executed, but even if a person wanted to say, well, let's translate this verse more literal. So she was at least humiliated for the rest of her days, and she could no longer act like a queen.
The rest of her days, meaning she was sent to Gehenna.
Well, so I mean, in a sense, that would be a fate worse than death for some people in that perspective, because she was the daughter of Belshazzar and the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar.
No, he was the great granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar because
yes,
her grandfather
was Avil Merodach.
Yeah, in Nevel Merodach, the one who was a tzaddik because he showed kindness to the king of Israel.
Right.
King of Yehuda.
Right. So I'm sorry. So I apologize. I forget exactly which source it was, but according to one of the sources I read, so they actually brought her head on a platter. She was beheaded, and they brought her head into the banquet.
So now they ate Vashti's head?
No, they're not eating Vashti's head. But I think this explains their custom to have a giant vat of wine for every person to drink. When bringing dead people's heads in, how could you even enjoy your food anymore? Just get drunk. There's no point to this meal anyway. You're gonna be grossed out by all the dead heads coming in here. Just get drunk already. It's the only way you're gonna get through this banquet. These people have some issues. They need to have a psychological profile only if, however, they are in chains to protect the psychologist from any beheadings along the way. Okay. Wow. Okay. So.
You didn't know yet. Yeah.
So now there is an interesting concept in the Targum on chapter 1 that we only start to have to deal with.
Yeah, you suck, Vashti.
Well, okay.
You're so evil. Even Hashem took away your soul. Well,
well, listen.
That's what you get.
Let's not.
I hate wicked people, you know.
Okay, but we don't. Once they're already beheaded, I mean, what do you?
Come on, I have a grudge against Rishayim who don't care about the Jews.
Well, listen, Vashti was not as evil as Haman. Okay, and Haman is rising to power in the book. So let's not.
But he almost did the same thing Hitler did.
Right, in a sense, he did worse because Hitler didn't try to kill every last Jew in the world. He was only trying to kill the Jews under his rule. Whereas Haman wanted to track down every Jew and kill every Jew. So Haman had worse plans than Hitler. That's pretty. It's pretty scary if you think about it. That anybody could have worse plans than Hitler.
Bizarre.
Yeah. So that's who Haman was. Okay.
He was like Asa.
Okay, so let's let me just find the commentary again. Trying to find
Did you
Hmm. Here. Okay, so that would be on the commentary in Judaica Press on chapter 2, verse 1. So let's start chapter 2, and then I'll read you from the Judaica Press commentary. Okay. Achar Devar Ma'ela, Shoch Hamas Hamelech Achashverosh Zachar Es Vashti Ve'es Asher Asasa Ve'es Asher Nigzar Aleha. Okay, now let's have Teresa return back to the translation since Eliezer Yaakov had a chance. Okay, Teresa, can you translate verse 1 of chapter 2?
After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her.
Okay, now read the commentary to verse 1.
He remembered Vashti as in with
Affection
and remorse. He remembered that he ordered her to appear unclothed before him and that he had put her to death for refusing. That's the Midrash. He told his servants that he realized his decree against her was unjust. Yosef Likas.
Lekash, right? Okay, so now let me read to you from the from the Judaica Press edition of Esther. Okay, so Targum gives this following interpretation. He states that the king executed the 7 wise men for advising him to dispatch Vashti. Okay, so now there's a problem with this.
He sent them to death for hurting his queen.
For advising him to hurt the queen. But there's a problem with this. Okay. Right. So let me go back to the Targum on chapter 1 and explain the problem here. Okay. Okay, so remember the 7 Sare Paras, right? And with the list that started with Karshana and ended with Memuchan. Okay. Right. So the verse says Memuchan was one of the 7.
Haman died?
How could he die if he appears in chapter 3? So I'm just telling you there's a stira, a contradiction in Targum, and I'm going to give you an explanation why there's a contradiction, at least how the contradiction can be answered. Okay, so chapter 1, that was again verse 14, that Memuchan was one of the 7 advisors, right?
The 7 advisors who were killed.
Well, right. So the Medrash says that they were killed, right? But the Medrash is based on the Targum.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then in verse, that's verse 14, verse 17 of chapter 1. Va'amar Memuchan hu Haman. Okay, that's the Targum, and then said Memuchan, he is Haman. Okay. So now Memuchan is linked to Haman. So we know Haman lives, right? Yeah. Now in chapter 2, verse 1, Targum says that the 7 were killed. So you could say the 7 were killed if you don't link Memuchan to Haman. Once you link Memuchan to Haman, how can you say the 7 were killed? Haman is in most of the chapters of the book.
Haman only died later on through hanging.
Right. He did not die immediately after the death of Vashti. Okay. So I will explain.
He only died through hanging to complete
Right.
the decree of Vashti that had been delaying his death.
Right. So he was no longer there as Mamuchan, right? As the least of the advisors. And this knowing Haman, this is my supposition. Because Haman was the first to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
So later he saw the king was regretful and angry with how could you guys advise me to kill her? So this is knowing Haman's personality, having read this story of quite a few times over the past
If Menuchan
few
died, that
decades.
means Menuchan must have been Haman's father.
No, so Memuchan was Haman. When we're talking about the Targum itself, it says Memuchan is Haman. So I'm just trying to explain simply the stira, the contradiction within Targum itself. So Haman was Memuchan. However, Haman was never again called Memuchan, right? Memuchan disappears from the story. That's because probably this is knowing Haman's personality and knowing Achashverosh's gullibility. This is probably what happened. Haman said, "Oh, it was their idea. I'm the least of the advisors. All of them voted for the death of Vashti. I told them no, but they forced me to tell their message." And Achashverosh must have believed him.
That's why he was spared.
So therefore, because of Haman's slander against them, all six were killed, and Haman changed his name from Memuchan, so even his name wouldn't remind Achashverosh of the role he played in Vashti's death.
That must have been why Achashverosh spared him from the death penalty, because he tattled on the other officers.
Right. So I mean, this fits in perfectly with the personalities of Haman and Achashverosh. Achashverosh, short-tempered, to the point of being willing to kill someone if he gets in his blood boiling, and Haman quite willing to put people into a murderous rage if it furthered his purposes. So all of his senior advisors who were basically educating him how to be an advisor, he got rid of with a single sentence of slander. I think this is a perfect explanation of how you could explain the Targum. Now, remember, Targum is usually in Tanakh. When we say Targum, we're talking about like either Targum Onkelos or Targum Yonasan. So both of them were Tanaim from the age of the Mishnah. That was written down 2,000 years ago. So they were at the tail end of the temple period, second temple period. So for them it was recent history. If Targum writes something down as a matter of history, it's very powerful. There's a very good reason to believe it's a literal thing that occurred. That's why when we have a stira, contradiction in Targum, that's a problem. But I think this, at least psychologically, this is a very good explanation to explain this stira, this contradiction.
He reminds me of the serpent in the garden.
Yeah. Remember, and the serpent in the garden was related to the angel. Of course the Yetzer Hara, right? Satan. And Satan, his other hat is to be Samael, the guardian angel of Edom. And Haman was the one of the most wicked people from Haman, from Edom ever. Him and Hitler were the two leading candidates. Well, there's a couple extremely cruel Roman emperors as well, bloodthirsty torturers. So I mean, Haman only tried to kill, but there were actually some people who tortured person after person after person, personally spilled blood. I'm not sure they're necessarily, I mean, Haman gets extra credit for all the evil he intended to do. but there were people who killed more people than Haman, Right.
That was sickening.
So I mean, it's just really it's a sick competition, but unfortunately. All right. So any questions so far? Okay. Let's continue in chapter 2. Let me just look at the other commentary here. Yeah. Okay, verses 2 through 5. Vayamru na'arei hamelech mashorsav yivakshu lamelech na'aros basulos tovos mareh v'yafkid hamelech pekidim b'chol medinos malchuso v'yikbetzu es kol na'ara basula tovas mareh el shushan habira el beis hanashim el yad ge'eh el yad hegeh seris hamelech shomer hanashim v'nason tam rukehen v'nara asher titav b'nei hamelech timloch tachas vashti v'yitav hadavar b'nei hamelech v'yaskin. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan habira Shmo Mordechai ben Yair ben Kish ben Shimi ben Kish ish Yemini. Okay, please translate the first verses 2 through 5 of chapter 2 of Esther.
Then the king's assistant said, "Let there be sought for the king young maidens of beautiful appearance, and let the king appoint commissioners in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they gather together every young maiden of beautiful appearance to Shushan the capital, to the harem under the charge of Haggai, the king's chamberlain, guardian of the women, and let their cosmetics be given them. Then let the girl who pleases the king reign in place of Vashti." The matter pleased the king, and he did so. 5 also?
Yeah.
There was a Jewish man in Shushan, the capital, whose name was Mordecai.
Yay!
Rawr!
Okay, no Gregors. That's by Haman. Okay.
Son of Jar, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite.
There you go. Okay, so so now there's an interesting that in the Art Scroll Tanakh series, Esther, they mention something they don't mention here in the blue edition of Esther. So I'm going to quote from that. So those of you who have it, this is on verse 5. Well, actually, Russell, you want to read that?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay, a Benjaminite. Read that paragraph.
A Benjaminite.
Page 55 in the Tanakh series.
Oh, you're on 55.
Yeah.
A Benjaminite, Mordecai, as a descendant of Benjamin, deserved to be instrumental in saving the Jewish people because Benjamin was the only brother who did not participate in the selling of Joseph into bondage. The descendants of the other brothers are perpetually punished for this crime.
Medrash Miam Lois. So this is a fascinating comment by the Medrash.
Punished for this crime by having their
Right.
descendants
Now,
killed by Romans.
Calm
Am I
down.
right?
Well, but you see now, for example, the Medrash Rabbah and the Medrash Tanhuma, they don't say this phrase, but listen to what the Miam Lois said. The descendants of the other brothers, in other words, not Joseph or Benjamin, are perpetually punished for this crime.
By the Romans, like I said.
Well, not just by the Romans. Well, yes, but the 10 martyrs did.
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah, and this is so it's not. In other words, I don't think you call it just a punishment. I think you call it. In other words, they were the forefathers of the tribes, so therefore, it's like Adam and Eve's mistake programmed humanity in a bad way. So the mistake of the 10 brothers against Joseph, and Benjamin wasn't born yet, so he's innocent. Program them to get themselves into trouble. It's like a bad mazel, not actual karma, but like bad karma, so to speak, in the colloquial usage of that. So therefore, it's a really fascinating idea. So now the question. So this explains why Mashiach ben Yosef has to be the one to defeat Edom, because there was a spiritual weakness put into 10 of the 12 tribes. So only Joseph and Benjamin could stand up against the Edomites, including the Amalekites, including Haman. So therefore, it was a Benjaminite who stood up against Haman, and it is Ephraimite who stands up against Gog and Magog. You understand? But the final war is only completed by Mashiach ben David. So in other words, the implication of this medrash, though, how do we explain that Mashiach ben David has the power to even fight the enemy of Gog, when really there's a spiritual weakness in every tribe but Joseph and Benjamin? That includes the royal tribe of Judah. Right. So and Mashiach is from the royal tribe of Judah. So how can Mashiach possibly overcome that? So remember that Mashiach is called Ish ben Partzi, the descendant of Peretz, but also the Hebrew word for Peretz as in Peretz Geder, to break through a fence. So in other words, Mashiach ben David breaks the mold. Now, how does Mashiach ben David break the mold of this like self-inflicted curse upon the 10 tribes? He does that because remember what the Medrash says: Mashiach ben Yosef is destined to be killed in battle until Mashiach ben David prays for him and saves him. Since one of the most righteous Ephraimites in history, Mashiach ben Yosef, is saved by Mashiach ben David, therefore Joseph has no complaint whatsoever. The forefather of that tribe, Joseph, has no complaints whatsoever with Mashiach ben David. So Mashiach ben David establishes an exception to the rule of the embedded curse on the 10 tribes, the spiritual weakness against the Edomites. Does no longer apply to Mashiach ben David, just as, for example, Phinehas became a priest through his standing up to Zimri ben Salo, right? So Mashiach ben David is Ish ben Partzi, and it's even this phrase is used in the Chadudi prayer to enter Shabbos, that we're going to be saved by the Ish ben Partzi. That's referring to Mashiach ben David. That God will save, use him as a catalyst in the redemption of God will do it by using Mashiach as a catalyst in the redemption process. So I think this explains it. So Mashiach ben David, because he rescues a hero from the tribe of Ephraim, he is above this implicit curse in the Medrash Miam Lois. But it's really fascinating because I never really heard this before outside of this comment. And so you see the cool thing about reading more than one book, right? If we only read here in the blue edition of Art Scroll, or if we only read it in Judaica Press, we wouldn't have covered this. But this is on page 55 in the Art Scroll Tanakh series, the very first Art Scroll Tanakh book. Really fascinating. Okay, now Russell, could you repeat now do the next verse, the next mini paragraph? Mordecai.
Mordecai was a descendant of King Saul and thus was instrumental in connecting Saul's iniquity of allowing Agag to escape and beget a son who was the forefather of Haman.
So now we understand why it's Mordecai was from Benjamin and not from Ephraim. Not only did you have to have someone who was immune to the self-inflicted curse on the 10 tribes, you have to have somebody who had to make up for a sin of their forefather. Mm-hmm. So Mordecai was a descendant of King Saul, and he had to fix the breach King Saul did. If not for the mistake of King Saul, which was like a very liberal thing to do, try to think about, well, he's a person too, let me be gentle with him, even though God gave a specific command. So in other words, Saul erred on the side of liberalism, which, in Western civilization, we think, if you're going to make a mistake, it's better to be more liberal than more, totalitarian, right? But no, in this case, it enabled the fascism of Haman and the leader of the Nazis as well. So it had to be someone from Benjamin to do two things: not be susceptible to the spiritual powers of the Edomites, mm-hmm. and not to allow the sins of his forefather to continue. He had to do a tikkun, a rectification of the sins of his forefather, so that Israel wouldn't suffer from that in the future, and Saul could rest in peace, with not feeling like he's let such a danger to his people exist. So very fascinating. Isn't this really cool? What do you say, Russell?
Yeah, it's cool.
All right, there you go. Okay. Cool stuff. Yeah, so this is the benefit of not just reading one book. Okay, I invested a lot for this book. I'll read it. I'll know everything there is to know about this, what this book says about this topic. But only reading one book doesn't give you the Kabbalistic strength called Bina. Learning one thing from another thing, because we could do a multi-text comparison. We're able to even come to this understanding.
Also, okay. Rabbi, at the beginning here of verse 5 in the same commentary, it talks about, which is interesting here, a Jewish man. All of those who were exiled along with the kings of Judah were called Yehudi by the Gentiles, regardless of their original tribes.
Page 53, yes.
54, at the beginning of 5.
Sorry, in the Art Scroll Tanakh series, it's 53. But you're in the blue edition again?
I'm in that edition. That's where I'm at. I mean, the numbering may be a little bit different.
So it's down here on page 53 in my copy.
Mine's a little different. So mine's a little further. The numbering's a little different, but it's still at the beginning of verse 5.
Yeah.
It says that in yours, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a quote from Rashi.
So it's interesting how at this point the tribes were no longer distinguished, at least amongst the Gentiles. They were referring to them all as Yehudi.
Yes, this is I believe the first time chronologically in Tanakh that it's mentioned Yehudim.
I think so.
Yeah, and then in chapter 9 especially, it's going to repeatedly say the Jews in this book. Okay, so now, if you don't mind going a little bit longer, I'd like to really finish chapter 2. I don't know if we can though. We're kind of going slower than they do on Megillas Esther readings in Purim, but at least getting to chapter 2, if not chapter 10.
Not Purim yet.
Right.
Purim's next year.
Okay, so if we do two chapters a week, so that would take us 5 weeks to finish this. But I think just because we're getting started, we have more special commentaries to quote. I think
And we have to start all over again with the Chumash of by the Chumash the Tanakh starting with the 5 books of the Torah.
5 books of Moses.
You have to go back all over again, starting with the 5 books of Moses before doing this again.
Okay, so I see one more quote on chapter 2. That's also another one of these interesting comparative studies.
Right. We just have to do a preview of the 5 books of the Torah after this.
Well, one thing at a time, sir. One thing at a time. But we're just starting the writings. We just started with the book of Daniel, now doing Esther. Previously, we did cover the book of Lamentations. Okay, so this is now the third book of the writings that we're doing. So there will be a total of 5 Megillas in total, right? So there's 3 more Megillas after this. There's the books of Psalms, Proverbs, Job, right, and other books. But next one in chronological order though is Ezra. So after we finish the book of Esther, God willing, and we're blessed to continue this. So then I would start teaching the book of Ezra. Okay, so let's see what we can do to get to the next part of the book. Let's continue here in verse 2. I don't think we're going to quote from the commentary as much until we get to the end of the chapter. So I think we can make some headway. Someone had a question? Please make sure you're unmuted.
No, that's my chair squeaking, Rabbi.
Okay, your chair asked a very nice question. My compliments.
Yeah, he has a lot of questions.
And your chair is backwards. You have to fix it.
Okay.
I'm talking to Russell.
Okay.
Russell, you have to fix your chair. It's falling apart.
Yeah.
Well, make sure your chair doesn't make any mouse-like noises, because it could distract my son while he's still in.
It is, yeah.
Because he was practicing cat dialogue today, and I don't want him to get distracted. Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, we just finished verse 5. Let's go to verse 6. Asher hagla mirushalayim im hagola asher haglasa im Yechanya melech Yehuda asher hagla Nebuchadnezzar melech Babel v'hi omen es hadasa hi Esther bas dodo hi ein la av v'em v'nara yefas tor v'tovas mareh uvamos aviha v'ima lekacha Mordechai lo labas. Okay, please translate through verse 7. 6, 7, and 6 and 7. Yes.
Okay. Who had been exiled from Jerusalem, along with the exiles who had been exiled from with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had exiled, and he had reared Hadassah. She is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The maiden was finely featured and beautiful of appearance, and when her father and mother had died, Mordecai adopted her as his daughter.
Okay, so as I cover this, I'm remembering more commentaries that we have to cover. So again, I'm not sure we're going to finish this chapter tonight, but hopefully, I mean, this is all cool stuff. What can I say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there is an overview to this book in the blue edition. It's also the same text is found in the Tanakh series, the white edition of Art Scroll Esther. So either way, so in the overview in the blue book, it's on page 9 of the overview. The paragraph about Esther, the next paragraph that has the in parentheses, I'm sorry, that says on the side Esther and Halacha. So I'll show you what it looks like. So Esther and Halacha. We're going to go here. Okay, Teresa, can you read from there? Esther and Halacha, page 9 in the blue edition overview.
Yes, I'm trying to get there.
Thank you.
According to those who hold that Esther was married to Mordecai, her plight presents enormously complex halakhic problems. She was involved in 2 sins, even though she was coerced, which every Jew must sacrifice his very life to avoid. She was a married woman engaged in adultery. And number 2, by living with Sarah, she caused a public desecration.
Chil Hashem, right? Desecration of the name of God.
Desecration of the name of God, also a sin that a Jew must give up his life to avoid. There is a third area of difficulty. A married woman who commits adultery is forbidden to her husband unless she was coerced. When Esther went to plead for her people, she went willingly, thus becoming forbidden to her husband Mordecai.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. So if she was indeed Mordecai's wife, not his adoptive daughter, so it's a debate. So that creates even a greater tragedy because she was unable to convince Achashverosh to relent from trusting Haman until she willingly slept with him, which created a act of willful adultery, which made her forbidden to Mordecai, according to the Torah law.
Because Achashverosh would hurt.
No, so in other words,
some way.
well, every time Achashverosh was with her intimately, it was like a rape in halacha. So she could have
was hurting her.
She could have returned to Mordecai after Achashverosh died, but once she willingly submitted herself to him, therefore she created a halachic quandary. So now there's one more aspect of this. If you look in the Art Scroll Tanakh series, yeah. So this is a very good question by Art Scroll, right? And it's even a bigger question when you look at again this is in the Art Scroll Hebrew English edition of Tanakh. So you look in Appendix B, chart 14, page 2038, page 2038. Right, it's the list of the prophets and the list of the 7 prophetesses.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, Miriam, Devorah, Hannah, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther. Esther is number 7.
She would
So
not have.
Esther was a prophet of God, and she has all these severe spiritual dilemmas. If she was Mordecai's wife, if she's the daughter, it's more simple. So this could explain why the Kasiv and the way it's written is different from the way the Talmudic seems to prefer that she was. Talmudic view seems to prefer that she's his wife, not his daughter. But it's written that she's his daughter in the text, perhaps since it was written down in her generation as a deference to the prophetess, to not shame her. She was called a daughter, but really everybody who knew the story knew that she was Mordechai's wife. That would explain why it's written daughter, but the Talmud doesn't seem to give that as much weight as the fact that she was probably Mordechai's wife. Okay, so let's continue this discussion of the halacha of a prophet of God, a woman prophet of God who had this horrible dilemma of having to engage in adultery if it was willful, and again, if she was raped repeatedly, that's not her fault according to the Torah law. And then Chil Hashem, what's the special halacha of Chil Hashem? If a person, remember, it's in stories of Shmad, like Jews who were killed by the Inquisition, right? If you know somebody's trying to force a Jew to worship an idol, or kill someone, or commit adultery, they have to be willing to die rather than do the sin, because they're trying to force a opposite effect of the honor of God. So it's a desecration of God's name in that sense. Okay, so the adultery thing is not adultery, except she had to give herself over to it for the sake of saving the entire nation. So first of all, it's fascinating. She was like depressed, right? Because she kept being raped by her the evil king, but she was still a prophet of God. God. So it shows that even if a person was raped repeatedly, they're still holy before God. They could be as holy as a prophet. And Esther is an example of this. She was a holy prophet despite the fact that she was being abused by her husband. Fascinating. Okay.
Well, what about the idea, Rabbi, that she was married, a Jewish woman was married to a Gentile?
That's the least of the problems.
It's the least of the problems.
The least of the problems.
Right.
Okay.
Right, exactly. Because being married to a Gentile is not a necessarily a self-capital offense. But being forced to murder someone else, they have to be willing to die rather than to do it, right? So adultery is in the category of like trying to kill someone. That's how severe it is. So it's worse than intermarriage.
Yeah, but do you hold to that? Do you hold that she was married to Mordecai?
Yes, that's my interpretation is that she was married to Mordecai. Okay, so let's continue this ArtScroll commentary. This is very, very important to go through this. Okay, so Teresa, now on page 10, the main Talmudic sources.
There it is. Sorry. The main Talmudic sources on these questions are Kedusha, 3b, and Sanhedrin 74b, where Tosafos and other commentaries deal with these matters at length. We will offer no more than a few of their main trends of thought. Nothing that follows should be used as a basis of halakhic discussion. Anyone seeking a full understanding of the matter must study the primary sources. Esther was never an active participant in either the sin of adultery or the sin of desecration of Hashem's name at any time during her marriage with Ahasuerus. She was also passive, always passive, Sanhedrin 74b. Her righteousness was in such magnitude that her initial revulsion of being forced to submit herself to the king was never in doubt, nor was there the slightest.
You'll be recorded if you talk to your bracha. Just don't talk around him.
Nor was there the slightest suspicion that it became erode with the passage of time or the allures of palace life. Kosovo's Kosovo's 57b. An important element in any consideration of potential desecration of the name is whether the non-Jew regarding the
requiring
requiring the given act intends that the Jewish victim violate his or her religion. Sanhedrin 74b. Ahasuerus was driven solely by passion. Not knowing Esther was Jewish, he could not have intended that she profane her religion.
Let's pause there for a second. So this is the key factor about Esther not having to kill herself because of the Chilo Hashem involved, the desecration to God's name, is because she took Mordechai's advice and did not say that she was Jewish. Because she didn't say she was Jewish, there could be no Chilo Hashem driven imperative for her to kill herself, rather than to submit to the sin. Okay, but again, for a person, I find that it's amazing commentary about the way God looks at people. She must have felt horrible that she was raped for years by Achashverosh. She must have not felt herself, who could under such circumstance, and yet God considered her a prophet, a holy woman. So this is a very important statement about what the Tanakh is teaching us about the way God looks at us. It's not how we feel about ourselves; it's what God feels about ourselves. So it's important for us to learn God's Torah, and what we're learning about God's wisdom and his attributes by the way the Torah is explained here. But this is very important. Again, let me repeat that. It's not how a person identifies themselves or looks at themselves, even if they look at themselves as less than the value of a regular human, subhuman in some way. Like all too often, we understand that rape victims must feel. Nevertheless, she was considered a holy prophet before God, and she received prophecy. So the implication of this is even more powerful, but it only exists if she was in fact a married woman, which is why I think this actually occurred. Is one of the reasons, because the imperative of this lesson in history, that God could bring prophecy to a person even if they feel less worth than the regular person would feel. That's amazing. It's just because she was making all the right choices within her range of free will. She was not choosing to do evil, and when she willingly had relations with Achashverosh, it was only to save an entire nation from destruction. So,
would that fall into the category of a bribe of Satan?
Well, that's a kind of a complicated thing, but effectively, the concept that something negative has to occur for something good to slip in there under the circumstances when not enough people are doing righteousness to bring down the spirituality. For example, on Mount Sinai, you had an entire nation paying homage to only God as the one God. So therefore, it brings down the holiness to the world. Whereas here you had individuals, Mordechai and Esther, they were individually bringing down God's salvation, because Mordechai, if you look at the other commentaries, again, we didn't cover every commentary. Mordechai was only one of the elders in Shushan that did not participate in the feast, the banquet that dishonored God, because of the vessels of the temple were misused there. So Mordechai was the only of the leaders in that part of the kingdom who was righteous. and Esther was the prophet, and his wife. So this one family was basically the entire salvation was coming through this one family. So for that to happen, yeah. So there's a trade-off between what God would want to do for the world and what free will demands. So when an entire nation chooses holiness, so God just acts freely. That's what happened at Mount Sinai. When the entire nation is not involved in the salvation, only a single family is involved in the salvation, so that it has to come through unusual means. It's a very powerful lesson we're learning here in the book of Esther, and we're only 2 chapters in. Okay.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Mhm.
In the circumstance when they were looking for the maidens, if they had vocally said, "Hey, she's my wife," would they have taken her anyway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's explicitly mentioned in the commentaries, and this is one of the commentaries points out. This is the reason why it was important not to say anything, since she would have been taken anyway. If she would not have been taken, they would have surely said she's married. It's not like Abimelech from last week's parsha.
Yeah.
But
do you think that Mordecai consummated his marriage with Esther?
Yes, that's the implication.
Okay. Well, so then Ahasuerus would have known that she was not a virgin. Would that have mattered?
No, in fact, they had a 1 year marriage preparation period. So they would bring in a bunch of girls that the king wants to marry. They would be put in the harem, and they wouldn't have relations for a year. And then after a year, they would have relations. So this did two things. It allowed that it's a special month-long process of creating cosmetics in those days. So they had to it took them almost a year to create these special oils. In addition, I read a commentary that it was to protect the king against any woman having a disease. So it would show up within a year if she had any diseases. So in other words, there was so much promiscuity that they were protecting the king from different types of like venereal disease or something, to make sure that especially because they were looking for very attractive women who would have a harder time to avoid getting involved with men before that time. Understand?
Mm.
This is all very interesting. Different
So it's very fascinating stuff here.
Mhm.
Okay, if you don't mind finishing that chapter paragraph, even after she revealed her identity.
Even after she revealed her identity, Ahasuerus retained her as queen purely because he loved her rather than as an intention to desecrate her religious beliefs. Until the fateful days when Esther voluntarily presented herself to Ahasuerus to pursue the salvation of her people, Mordecai had no doubts about his status as his wife. Her status as his wife. Then she feared, as Commentary 4:16, that Mordecai might suspect her of acting the temptress and no longer wish to remain her husband, despite the compelling circumstances under which she acted. See Shita.
Shita Mekubetzes on Kesuvos 3b. So she was emotionally faithful to Mordecai, even though she was being forced. So she always hoped to go back to him until she saw that she had to willingly seduce the king to make him be broken from the spell of Haman and save her people. So extremely tragic turn of events where she had to willingly commit adultery to protect her people. And for a modest woman, of course, to not just a modest woman, but a modest woman to the level she was one of the 7 great prophetesses of history, that one of the most modest women in world history, that she had to act intentionally promiscuous. It was an incredibly difficult feat, like kind of like Abraham trying to offer his son Isaac on the altar. A very big test.
Don't you think it's interesting? It's no coincidence that it was sex that got us kicked out of the garden and sex that saved the Jewish people?
Oh.
Well, it,
Do you see what I'm seeing here?
yeah, but you see, the sin of immorality that occurred in the garden was actually by the serpent.
I know, but
It wasn't.
Ashereth is the serpent. So's Haman.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Adam and Eve, when they Adam and Chava, they didn't have immorality with each other. They were designed for each other. They were the quintessential husband and wife. But there is a medrash that says that the serpent seduced Chava and had relations with her. So
Well,
that was bad. But
isn't that what
Chava didn't understand what was
afraid
happening.
of, that she was the seductress as a temptress?
Well, again, with Chava, she was innocent like a child, and the
Right.
servant took advantage of her. So, and Esther, she didn't. I mean, she was constantly being closeted with the most powerful man in the world at the time. Who had unlimited financial resources. There was reason to suspect anybody on a natural level. You could suspect anybody would be interested in that. But Mordechai trusted her. He knew she was a holy woman, a prophet of God. So, but it's
But
just she was a humble woman.
But what about the fact that it's still the conjoining, the union that caused problems, and the union that saved?
Yeah, and
there can't be a coincidence there.
Right, but you see what Sutton started to do was creating a problem through a holy marriage of Mordechai and Esther. The Medrash says that Mordechai took pity on her because she was orphaned. So he didn't want her to live alone, so he married her.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, it doesn't say, the fact that it doesn't say, Mordechai was honored to marry the most beautiful woman, so she was extremely modest, so he didn't even know she was one of the very most beautiful women. So now, according to commentary, let's see, I got it. Let's actually have it right here. So there's a debate in the commentaries. Most agree with the simple meaning of the text, that she was very beautiful, beautiful of appearance. It says explicitly in the Megillah, in the text of the book. But there is an opinion that goes that she was the great. Another hidden miracle of the book is that she was not attractive, and thereby God made a miracle that Achashverosh was even attracted to her. Now Mordechai would have married her even if she wasn't attractive. He was on that spiritual level, but Achashverosh would not have been attracted to her unless she was extremely beautiful to him. But again, the majority opinion is according to the simple meaning of the verse. She was extremely beautiful, but she was very modest. So first of all, she was not showing off her figure, for example, like everyone else was. They wanted to become part of the king's harem and have all the riches thrown at them. Secondly, and here it's brought down here in the Otzera Midrashim at the bottom here. Yeah, so this is a quote from Megillas Eliyahu that the reason why she was so it's a way of orphans sometimes to forget about their beauty because of all the trouble that they're going through. So in other words, according to those who say she was being modest, she didn't put up makeup because she wanted to not attract the evil king to a married woman. According to those who said she was overwhelmed by her her suffering as an orphan, and she was just a ward of Mordecai. So then it was her sorrow from being an orphan that made her not even care to put on makeup. But again, it's either they were married or they weren't. So therefore, the concern about her being an orphan is not as a compelling case. Further, the idea of her becoming a prophet means that she was making high level spiritual choices that were healthy. So that means that it must have been she actively chose to be more moral and not put on makeup, even though all the women around her put on makeup. Imagine showing up at a party without makeup and everybody else has makeup. For a girl, that's a thing. For a guy, it's like, all right, is there beer there? But for a girl, every other girl has makeup and she doesn't. So that could be a problem, psychologically speaking. But Esther was a prophetess, so of course she didn't put on makeup. So that's another wrinkle to this, another aspect of this.
You think it states in here that as the surest loved her, and he had more respect for her because he loved her, not just because she was so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that would
yeah, I mean, he's not used to the idea of respecting women. I mean, that too.
well,
Why do you gotta respect women when you can have all that wine? Just have a giant goblet of wine. Don't think about women's rights.
Well, he
Get
could have
drunk,
had- he
and
could have
then
had-
then get drunk with beer and be with all the ladies.
Oh, sorry, Linda had a comment. What did you say, Linda?
I was just saying he could have had all those other women, but there was something about her modesty
Mhm.
that struck his soul, and he had to have
Yes,
her.
but there's something else about this, and we may cover it later on. But one of the commentaries says that he did have other women. Every woman that was brought there joined his harem, so he married dozens of women.
Not just a
right,
queen.
but they only became concubines. Only one concubine would be raised up to become the queen of the empire.
That's sick. Why do you have like 1,000 wives like King Shlomo?
I don't know if he had 1,000 wives. If you now let's see, I think it's here in the Judaica Press. Okay, so yes, okay, so it's really cool. Another feature of the Judaica Press. Yeah, I have an actual diagram of Ahasuerus' royal palace as discovered through archaeological searches. So let me show you.
Move back a little bit. There we go.
Okay. So here's the queen residence or harem. And here's the king's where the king's quarters, right? And here's where they met people over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thrones, right? Okay. So so the harem, you see, was the largest single room in the palace. So it was probably like like an equivalent of an army barracks of concubines. and only one of them would be able to raise up to become the queen. And actually, Achashverosh was praised for the fact that, considering how immoral he was, he actually ended up waiting 4 years from the time Vashti was killed until he remarried a actual queen. So he put, for a guy who only cares about his own passions, he put the needs of his kingdom first and waited 4 years to have an official queen. So he's praised for it. And the language of Chazal, of the holy sages, they call it sniuso, his modesty. So they say, the quote goes, how did Achashverosh, this is a paraphrase, how did Achashverosh merit to have such a modest wife in Esther? Is because he was modest for the sake of the good of the kingdom, to wait 4 years to get married to the best wife possible, to be the queen of the empire. So therefore, he deserved to have the holy and kind woman Esther as his wife. So it's so to such a wicked man, God is still looking for ways to reward every good deed. If by Achashverosh, who later on in the book easily gives himself over to the idea of Haman's plan to kill Jews, if such a wicked man is rewarded with a prophetess of God as his wife, because he just put the needs of his kingdom first before his passions one time, even though it was for 4 years. Nevertheless, it's really amazing that the extent that God goes to be generous to people, even if they're wicked. So now, if God is generous to the wicked, what is God going to do to the righteous? How much more so is it going to be great for the righteous? So therefore, it's another reason for us to be righteous, because God is going to notice every little step of the way of righteousness and reward us for it as well. So it's very fascinating.
May I ask something else?
Mm-hmm.
Having had 4 sisters and working with women all of my life, from the time I was 18 till I was 65, I call working with nurses in a hospital working in a harem. Okay? Because women are constantly jockeying for position of power. I promise you they are. And having observed this and worked within that system, Esther must have frustrated so many women unbelievably, and Hashem constantly kept her safe. Because poisoning, backstabbing, I'm telling you, you're walking a fine line.
But listen, we have in attendance, we have at least 4 ladies in attendance tonight, and none of you are fighting with Teresa over reading the Tanakh. You see, you're all on a different level. So not all women are bad. You guys are proving
I didn't say they were bad. I'm saying you're working. Esther was the only Jew amongst all those Gentiles. And she was put above. Hashem put her above without her having to lift a finger.
Right. In fact, she was trying to hide from it. She went in there the only one without makeup.
Right.
And stuff like that.
So this is just her being put in the position was to me, as a woman reading this, I say, trusting Hashem, he takes you where exactly he wants you to be.
Yeah. In addition, according to your theory of based on the boot camp you went through in nursing school, whatever. So it was the kindest thing he could do is just help her skip that preparatory school system and get immediately into the marriage with a king and just get
That's
away from
right.
that harem. That harem was more risky than being with a king.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Damn.
so now I think we've come to the panemius, the inner workings of Linda's opinion about this situation.
We've got a
Well,
disgusting problem
we
here, folks.
overlook some really important points of Hashem, especially as women. You have to say Hashem will take care of you. He takes.
Yes, but
care.
Linda, I have to quote a passage, that kind of contradicts one thing you said. Remember, sugar and spice and everything nice. So how could what you say possibly be true?
Because it's a big fat lie. It's a big fat lie.
Okay, so I think we have to add a commentary according to Linda. Sugar and spice and everything nice, or else, like that.
Yeah, because
Yay.
I promise you, women are not sugar, and so that's only what they pretend to present to most of the men who are blind. Blind.
No, we
Everyone's
just
going
have
to-
very important things in life to take care of, which is which brand of beer and which of the football games available. I mean,
That's why you're
we're
blind.
so busy, we don't have
Serve me
time
my
to really get
pizza.
into. We're so busy, we don't have time to get into all these political controversies between one group of girls and another.
Now, Rabbi, how many football games did you watch today?
No, I observed the Sabbath to keep it holy, so I did not actually watch football.
I've watched 1 billion football games today.
But if any of you are visiting, you can bring me a brewski on a particular Sunday, perhaps. Okay. We'll discuss which brand of beer, obviously, because it has to be on the right teams playing each other. Okay.
You're silly.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we have crazy grandpas.
So apparently, I'm able to be silly because I was not in a harem.
That's right. That is
Shitas Linda.
absolutely right.
Linda's opinion.
Whew.
Well, this has been very good, Rabbi, reading this commentary like this.
Yeah.
But I think we're at a good stopping point here, though.
Okay, very good. What verse did we get up to? Do you remember? I was so much into the commentaries.
We went through 5, I think.
To 2:5.
Uh-huh.
I think
well,
that's
No,
we went
no.
further than 5.
we went a little bit further. Well, we could backtrack and figure it out.
So I'm going to put it down. You want to put it as 5, Rabbi, and then we'll back.
No. Well, I could listen to the recording after it's posted, and we could edit it later. Yeah, is that possible?
Okay, that or Teresa will figure it out where we were.
I thought
Yeah,
we went through.
I was just concentrating so much on the commentaries,
I don't know.
and you see,
I
I was
we went through 9 because it covers Hadassah and it
Yeah,
covered how
something like that.
beautiful she was.
right.
All right.
Something like that.
So
yeah,
we're
and
gonna put it through 9, and then if we have to edit it, we can.
Okay, something like that. And so we actually went through at least 4 different volumes here on my desk, on my table here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was having a problem tracking how far I was reading. So please use. Yeah, very nice. Okay, so is, any of the other ladies care to disagree with Linda or agree with her? This is a unique
Well, I'm going to
opportunity.
disagree with her. I'm going to disagree with her on the point that men don't know. I think they know. They're just scared to say.
No, I actually didn't know.
I promise you. I bet that's another possibility.
We know all about it. Don't worry about it. We know. We just choose not to bring it up.
It's better not to get involved in that bloodbath.
Yes, it is.
See?
So anyone else want to care to talk about their harem survival days or no?
No, I just think it's important to remember that Esther was carefully placed, and that yes, women can be quite difficult to have to be around sometimes. It was so nice not to have to. It was so nice just to be able to step back into the shadows and let them all do their thing.
Yeah, so and it's really an amazing story. I don't know if we'll cover every commentary on this, but for example, Mordecai was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was one of the starting, maybe the starting member of the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, men of the Great Assembly, that included Ezra and others, and it started the era of the Mishnah. It all started here with Mordecai, and he, as a member of the Sanhedrin, he understood 70 languages. So this is a genius. So this explains why a young orphan would be proud to marry such a scholar. And he was a world-class scholar of incredible magnitude. And so why would a young girl want to marry a more elderly scholar? So this explains it. He was just absolute genius. And also we see that she must have been extremely righteous to work at that level and not look for more you would think a more conventionally compatible age group. But again, in those days, if a woman wasn't married or wasn't adopted, she had very little income opportunities, especially if she was moral. Let's put it that way. And therefore, she desperately needed to get married. But you would have thought she would just, find a young, handsome guy and just marry whoever it is. Probably Mordecai was a older, handsome guy, but he was, older. So, again, but it all worked out for the best. If not for Mordecai's advice, don't say that you're Jewish. She would have told them she's Jewish. They would have forced her to commit adultery intentionally, and as a woman of the priestly nation, she would have to willingly kill herself or allow herself to be killed rather than allow herself to be forced by Achashverosh. So it all came out of Mordechai gave her good advice. It's really fascinating. Another wrinkle to the story. So if a world-class sage gives advice, maybe it's good to listen. In other words, but you had a question or a comment, Elijah?
Yeah, my question is, if Achashverosh was anti-Semitic, why didn't he kill Esther when she told him the truth?
He didn't.
The end.
Right, he didn't care.
In the end, after Haman died,
he didn't look at her as a person with a religious philosophy. He looked at her as the woman he loved. That's it. That was the full extent of his. He may not have been capable of looking at women as people who could become religious or not religious. Did he love her or not? That was the full capacity for him to think about someone else. Apparently, judging favorably. I mean, he willfully in the I think it was the Medrash Rabbah on Esther in the introduction. He willfully gave himself over to the idea of Haman to kill the Jews. And we'll see later on, Haman offered him a lot of money, and he turned it down because he was so good with. Oh no, I'll take care of it. Something like that. It was really amazing how scarily, amazingly bad how willingly Achashverosh was to get involved in such genocide. And then, for the sake of the woman he loves, he changed his mind again. So fickle and so many bad character traits, but thank God he was fickle enough for Esther to be able to wake him up from the evil of Haman. But he only paid attention to her when she started to initiate the relations between them. Oh, she loves me too now. You know, but thank God, thank God. So as you can tell, the story of the Book of Esther is much deeper than maybe if you're only listening to it twice a year and in the synagogue, then maybe you've covered before. So we've got a long way to go. We're probably going to take anywhere from 3 to 4 or even more weeks to go through this book. So, but that's okay. I mean, this is really amazing stuff. Thank God.
It's very good.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for learning with me.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.